Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program. Website thisweekinamerica.us. New York-based Alex Kaufman is the author of The Precipice Option. 69 years after World War II, a story still untold and brimming with controversy. Alexander was born a little before Hitler's ascent to power in Germany. He remembers watching as a toddler the celebratory nightly brown shirt torch parades through the streets. The early decision of his parents to leave for then British-mandated Palestine was a matter of foresight, devoid of any political agenda. The book we're talking about again is called The Precipice Option. The Precipice Option. Alexander is an avid researcher, years spent researching this book. He had a successful career as an editorial cartoonist, as a museum developer and designer. We'll have him back on the program to talk about that. Talking more about The Precipice Option today, the initial program we did is available on our YouTube website. You can see the video of it by going to thisweekinamerica.us. Hit the YouTube icon and look for our program with Alexander Kaufman. Alex, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you back with us. An important story, and we couldn't fit it into one program. I'm sure we won't be able to fit it into two, but we're going to give it a shot today. Welcome back to the program. Great to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Rick, for inviting me again.
It is a fascinating story. 1944, the last months of the war. Two train platforms, thousands of Jews herded daily onto the Budapest train platform headed for Auschwitz, and an adjacent platform, 1,684 Jews that were sent off to Switzerland. That's the basis of the story. And I mentioned the research. I understand it was, 5-6 years that you actually spent before you were able to put the book together, just doing the research for this.
Well, I tell you, research is not only, any research. Once you start, it's like an open pit. You don't know how far you're going to go with it. And then there's always another piece and another piece and another place. And that's how you try to complete the research. And then, of course, it reveals many things. It's the purpose of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure as you were working on this that you thought, okay, maybe that road is going to close here very shortly. And then you would get a piece of information and you'd find out, wait, I got like 100 more miles on this road that I need to go down. In fact, I think you talked about it and compared it to like the Russian nesting dolls where you think you're done and you pull it off and you've got another one.
Another one.
Yeah.
Yes, the Matryoshka dolls. Yes, when you open it, there's always another story in there. And again, you cannot put a time element on research. Because again, it's almost in a way detective work. You don't know what's coming out, and you aim to finish it, and you have to. And so I think it's also a matter. Your curiosity rises as you go along, and you discover things.
How did you find out about this story? And our guest on This Week in America is Alexander Kaufman. The book is called The Precipice Option. The website is the-precipice-option.com. You can link onto that directly at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. I mentioned 69 years after World War II, a story still untold. It's unfolded in the book, The Precipice Option. It's a story that I've never heard of until I actually read the book. How did you hear about this and decide there's really a story here that does have to be told?
Well, I tell you, I heard about the train, which there's still some survivors. There are many survivors around from the train, and they have annual reunions, and I heard about it, and I learned about it, and I know some people that were part of this train. And as I looked into the story, I said, wait a minute, how could this happen? A train like this in the middle of the war, when 12,000 people are being deported to Auschwitz every day on a train platform, and not far from there stands another train with 1,684, very odd number, going to Switzerland. This is like as if they were shooting to the moon. It was so improbable, this whole thing. It was so unbelievable. What happened there? Also, who authorized it? Who let it go out? And that's where it started, and that's how I found. Then I tell you, quite frankly, I hesitated. I thought, look, there must be all the stories of World War II were told already. And then I figured, well, this is an untold story. This is really an untold story that oddly enough, also many people that were on the train, and the train was only the tip of an iceberg. The train is not the major part of the story. The train is an outcome as one of the elements that came out of that story. But it's to find out what happened, why it happened, was a major thing.
And that's why, yeah, it makes what you did in terms of research so much more impressive, because this was uncharted territory. Nobody had really, you said the story was untold, so you're finding out this story for the first time. And we'll talk about leverage, which is a key part of this, leverage and timing in the story. But this is, if people are just listening and understanding what we're talking about and saying, I never heard of that before, this is real, true history we're talking about here, isn't it?
Well, I found, as I mentioned to you, I found that there were many odd situations. Of course, everything is a matter of timing. What happened here, this tremendous rescue that we're talking about, but the numbers are just mind-boggling. I mean, how do you rescue 400,000 people? I mean, this is something incredible. That's hard to believe. And but the way it happened was also timing. And it all had to do, of course, the instigator, the main instigator was the chief murderer, was Himmler. Himmler wanted to replace Hitler because he felt that Hitler is losing the war. And he felt that he wanted to do a separate peace with the Allies. And how do you get to the Allies? Because he had no credibility. He was known as a murderer. Himmler was the one who was in charge of everything. He was in charge of the Gestapo, the SS, all the concentration camps, all the police departments, all the bad stuff that the Germans did, the organization of the SS. He practically had a private army such as the Waffen-SS. And Himmler was omnipotent. I mean, you just couldn't touch him. The thing was also that he was the one who caught everybody else if he wanted to catch him, but nobody could catch him. So he went out and he believed his own propaganda. That is the funny part of it. He said, look, there's such a thing as world Jewry. There's no such thing. There was never an organization like that. On the contrary, Jews were organized in many organizations, but lots of organizations. So he felt there was this one thing called world Jewry, which Goebbels promoted in his propaganda. Goebbels was the propaganda minister and invented this whole thing. And then after years and years and years of listening to it, they start believing it. So he believed his own bluff. And he went out and he figured, where do I find Jews? And he figured that the last, where he still has Jews that he didn't kill off, was in Hungary, because Hungary was only taken over that year, 1944, because it was an ally of Germany, and they only started taking Hungary over or get into Hungary when the Italians fell off the wagon, when the Italians lost the war and made a separate peace with the Allies, and the Germans were afraid of the southern flank being threatened. So what happened was that now he went to one of the leaders of the rescue committee in Budapest and said to him, look, here's a list of things we want. I'm still holding 1 million Jews. I'll trade you the 1 million Jews. I'll let them go. And I'll trade you for the list of things that I'm presenting to you. Now, what was on the list? On the list were 10,000 trucks. So he said, but I promise you, I'm not going to use the trucks against you. I'll use the trucks only against the Russians. And let us unite against the Russians, because they're communist, they spread communism, which both of us don't want. And he meant the West and Germany. And you'll help us defeat them. I still have an army that's a little intact and I can use. We can make some, and we know how to fight them. And that's what we want. So, of course, everybody considered it totally, absurd. This was an absurd thing. Who's going to give you 10,000 trucks? But here's the thing, Rick. With the 10,000 truck, he also wanted cocoa, and he wanted soap, and he wanted all sorts of things that, of course, they missed. They didn't have. So, however, the leader, the chief protagonist in Budapest, said, and wait a minute, everybody was yelling and screaming around him, it's a trick, it's another trick. Look at the train station, 12,000 people he kills every day. What are you going to believe this? You're going to believe this list? You're going to believe this piece of paper? It's a trick. He said, no, I think it may be something we can use as leverage. Here's the first time they come to us. They're negotiating with us. They're asking something of us. They never asked of us anything. They just came in and confiscated and took it and threw us out. So why not try to use it? So we have to build it up. So people, of course, said, what, you're going to go to the Allies with this? Is nonsense. They'll laugh in your face. You want 10,000 trucks for the Germans? For the head of the SS, you want 10,000 trucks? Are you crazy? He said, well, I tell you what, if we can use it as a leverage, we don't have leverage. And here's the funny part, Rick. Who furnished this leverage? The Germans furnished the leverage. Because you were looking, in other words, if you negotiate, as you know, in anything, in any matter, you got to have some leverage. You can't just have one side has everything and the other side has nothing. So what is the good for negotiations here? What kind of negotiation is that? However, if you can use it, if you can make now, but the big deal now is to make the Germans believe as if somebody is considering this crazy list. Let's say somebody is considering. So it went so as far as where the Germans provided a special plane and sent an emissary, a Jewish emissary, one who worked on the committee, send them to Istanbul, to a neutral place, so he can start talking to the Allies. And he flew out. It was incredible. A German plane was flying a Jewish emissary to Istanbul to negotiate. Negotiate the list.
This is the untold story. It's in the book written by Alexander Kaufman. The Precipice site is the-precipice-option.com. And our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on directly. You don't have to worry about the hyphens. You can link on directly to Alex's website and get information on the book. Talk about leverage, and you mentioned before that the timing was crucial. This would not have worked, at another time. It just happened to be the right time where they were able to pull off the leverage.
I'm sorry, come again?
Yeah, timing was really crucial here, wasn't it? A very important component of how they were able to use the leverage.
Well, what was crucial was time.
Yes.
In other words, what happened in reality, of course, at the time, no one knew that. Within 15 months from the start of this thing, and I guess let's look at the start from the time the list was presented, from the start of that thing, that there were 15 months till the end of the war. So there was actually a race against the clock, because everyone knew that the war is going to end. The Germans were losing right and left. But definitely they knew they're going to end. However, nobody knew when. And then there were always two parts among the German hierarchy. There were the fanatic SS people who said the Hitler has a secret weapon, and the rockets and atomic bombs and who knows what. And the other said, we're lost. Let's save our necks. Let's get some insurance so they don't hang us when this whole thing is over. And the protagonist, the main protagonist by the name of Kastner of this whole story, is he found an SS colonel who was very close to Himmler. He was close to Himmler in the sense that he had Himmler's private telephone number. He could contact Himmler anytime he wanted. Now, this was a very unusual kind of situation. And he went to him, and this was a very shrewd and smart fellow. And he said to himself, you know what? I have to save my neck after the war. If I get involved here, I have to see how I can secure some kind of life insurance for myself after the war. So I will help. So he went, so in a sense, he became a partner together with Kastner. These two guys had sort of a Siamese twins relationship, but everyone knew what he was aiming at. Kastner had one thing in mind, and he made it very clear, and the other guy, the colonel, knew that. He says, I want to save lives. I want you to close up Auschwitz. I want you to break down the ovens there. And the other guy was the colonel said, I'll do my best, of course. And he again was interested in saving his neck. And he felt if Kastner, if he's going to do this for the Jews, then he'll get a sort of a certificate of good behavior after the war, which really happened. That's exactly what happened. But in the meantime, he was extremely useful and became, because he had the ear of Kastner, he had a situation of Himmler, of Hitler, of Himmler, I'm sorry, I apologize, of Himmler. He was sitting, there were days where he was sitting making phone calls to Himmler, and Kastner was sitting next to him and telling him and asking him to tell Himmler to do this and this and that. And one of the things he told them was, for instance, when they were poised to take, when the Allies, especially the British troops, came in from the north, when they came into Bergen-Belsen, which was a huge concentration camp, and the Germans were poised on one side of the camp, the Allies on the other side of the camp, and the inmates were in between. And they were going to start a fight. And he said, tell Himmler to surrender the camp. Again, this is part of the leverage. This was all part of the leverage. He said, you know, you want to talk to the Allies. Show some good signs here. Show some goodwill. Show that one can negotiate with you. Because nobody wants to negotiate with you. You're a bunch of murderers. So tell you what, if you saved 100,000 inmates in there, and you saved the British troops, and you probably saved some German troops too, but if you surrender the camp, surrender the whole area, get out of there, that'll be a big plus mark for you. And then what happened? Himmler agreed. And when Himmler agreed, then they jumped. Kastner jumped on the idea and said, tell you what, we have a whole slew of other concentration camps. This is the role model. Now let's do the same thing with all the others. And again, everything we did, saving ghettos, saving people in camps, saving lives, it all was done on the basis of this leverage, saying if you do that, then we'll talk. Because look, how can we negotiate? Nobody believes that you even mean what you're saying unless you show some signs, which the train, by the way, was one of them. The train was a goodwill token.
And a very obvious, and a very obvious sign that everybody could see, everybody knew was there, and trying to figure out the purpose of the train and whether this actually was a ruse or whether this was actually a train that was taking these people to some type of safety. The book is The Precipice Option. Alexander Kaufman, the author, our guest on the program. A couple minutes left in the program, and I'm wondering, as you're talking there, ramifications today. How does that fit into where we are today and how we got to where we are today?
Look, I would say, for instance, one of them that's the most outstanding, the crassest, is, first of all, you know, one of the worst things about Holocaust, which was horrible, is the copycats, that everybody is copying it all the way down to today, in Africa, wherever. You have people, it seems to be in human nature of these dictators or these upstarts. But they simply copycat. They take people, they deport people, they kill people en masse, and so forth. But one of the things that, for instance, we had in the 90s, we had the war in Yugoslavia. And I think there's a tremendous animosity there between Muslims, which are mostly in Bosnia, and Serbs, which are in Serbia, and it's intermixed a bit, of course. And the Mufti of Jerusalem, he was the head religious political leader of the Palestinian Arabs during the British Mandate. And he then fled because he was a German sympathizer, and he fled when the war started. And he ended up in Germany, he was in Berlin, and he was a visitor, pretty frequent visitor to Hitler. And Hitler set up for him, he said to him, I want to have an army, set me up an army, and I want this army then to go to Palestine and fight together with Rommel, who is coming up from Libya at that time in North Africa, and we want to free Palestine of the British. And Hitler gave him set up for him 2 divisions. Where did these divisions come from? They come from the Bosnian Muslims. So when they had the Bosnian Muslims, they were very fierce, and they were very much, of course, the Germans sent them into Yugoslavia because there were lots of partisans there. One of them, as we all know, was Tito's partisans, and they fought them in a most cruel way. And then the Mufti came back to Hitler and said, I'd like to have 2 more divisions, which will give me something like close to 50,000 soldiers. And I want you to equip them just like you did the first 2. Now what happens, these divisions were let loose in Bosnia and Yugoslavia, and they created tremendous animosity that people in Bosnia today remember what happened to their grandfathers and their fathers and their families. The animosity is still remembered there. That's what I saw and what I heard. And I think this is one of the things, while the war was so relentless in Bosnia and in Serbia, in Herzegovina, as you remember from the civil war in Yugoslavia,
yes,
as it fell apart. So I would say here's something that reverberates. It comes down from then to today. So history, in a sense, is very long and it's very short.
And oftentimes repeats itself. It's an excellent book, a fascinating story, and we will have Alex back on the program to talk more about the book, The Precipice Option. Also, I want to talk about trawling 20 centuries, talking about his career as a museum developer and designer, which I find fascinating. This book is theprecipiceoption.com is the website, the-precipice-option.com. Go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on directly to Alexander's website and get information on the book. Alex, as always, a pleasure having you on the program. Fascinating story. Excellent book. We look forward to having you back on the show. Thank you for spending some time with us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It is our pleasure. You're listening to This Week in America, the website thisweekinamerica.us.